Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Monisha and I work in an environmental protection agency as a healthcare administrator. For the next few minutes, you all will be with me to learn about mercury pollution and its health effects. Before we begin, I hope everyone has received one of the pamphlets with the seafood restriction. Mercury is one of the 20 least common materials in the Earth's crust and is the only metal that is liquid at room temperature. Because of its appearance as silver and its fluid nature, it is also called quicksilver. The symbol of mercury is Hg, which is deduced from the Latin term hydrogeum meaning watery silver. We buy and use mercury containing products, exposing ourselves to mercury in day to day life. Some of the products are batteries, fluorescent bulbs, electrical switches, and even the tooth filling material amalgam contains mercury. Mercury has three basic chemical forms. They are elemental, inorganic, and organic. When mercury is in its natural form, it is called elemental. If mercury combines with other elements, mainly chlorine, sulfur, and oxygen, then it is called inorganic. Whereas, if mercury combines with carbon or carbon containing substances, then it is in organic form. There are three main sources that contribute to mercury pollution: natural sources, human sources, and circulating mercury, which is also called re emit mercury. Natural sources include forest fires, volcanoes, fossil fuels, and cinnabar. Cinnabar is the only important ore of mercury. In ancient days, it was mined for use as a pigment and carved into jewelry because of its bright red color. Eventually, it was discovered that cinnabar is toxic, and its use as a pigment in jewelry began to decline, and now it's used only for the production of mercury. The largest source of mercury emissions comes from human activity, accounting for about 45%. Some of the biggest emitters are coal fired power plants, cement kilns, chlor-alkali plants, trash incinerators, and gold mining. Coal fired power plants are responsible for 50% of electricity in the United States, but at the same time, they emit about 50 tons of mercury yearly. If that is the case, why don't we opt for wind energy and solar energy? I believe it is the time to think. Secondly, cement kilns use mercury as their fuel and emit more than 1.5 times the mercury compared to coal fired power plants. But thank God, we have very few of them here. Hence, they contribute less mercury to the atmosphere. Chlor-alkali plants use mercury to produce chlorine gas. They use about 159 tons of mercury, out of which 29 tons is pumped out of industry into the water sources, polluting it. The health sector also emits mercury when they incinerate mercury containing products like the thermometer, blood pressure machines, etc. Mercury emitted by health sector adds up to 13.1 tons. Next is gold mining, which is often called as the most polluting industry, and they emit about 11.5 tons each year. US Geological Survey says that sediments and water near gold mining areas release hundreds of tons of mercury. Hence, it is not at all safe to stay in an area where there is gold mining going on. The third source of mercury pollution is re emitted mercury, which is also called as circulating mercury. Mercury produced in the atmosphere does not disintegrate easily. It circulates in the environment for more than 3 months and it can remain up to 2 years in the atmosphere by means of mercury cycle. The mercury cycle, as shown in the picture, begins when the mercury vapor is emitted into the air from its sources. Then it circulates in the atmosphere and gets deposited into the soil or water by rain. In the water, mercury is converted into insoluble forms like mercury sulfide, which settle in a sediment. These sediment are then converted by bacteria into an organic form and enters the food chain. Later, mercury is eliminated from organisms back into the soil, and from here it is re emitted back into the atmosphere to continue as mercury vapor. As said earlier, the bacteria in the sediments of rivers, lakes, and oceans convert mercury into methyl mercury, a very toxic form of mercury. Methyl mercury is the one that accounts for most of the negative health effects. This methyl mercury accumulates through the food chain by absorbing mercury contained in the food sources. Over time, the predators on the top of the food pyramid will acquire greater levels than its food. This process is called bioaccumulation, and the right side picture indicates the mercury level in each fish and explains why we can eat more trout than albacore in a month, more salmon than tuna. Now, we know mercury enters our body through the food chain, but there are other routes too. Mercury can enter into our body if we breathe in contaminated air, drink contaminated water, or ingest medicines containing mercury, or by coming in contact with mercury contaminated soil. Even mushrooms grown in contaminated soil have high mercury content. The good news for mushroom lovers of Phillip County is that your soil's mercury content is well within the normal range, so you people can enjoy mushrooms without hesitation. This slide gives us a comprehensive detail of which fish to eat and how much to eat. It is the same pamphlet that was distributed to all of you in the beginning. Fish like shark, swordfish, tilefish, which has been highlighted in orange, contain high mercury content, and these fish should be avoided to a greater extent. It is better to go through the list to see whether you have been exposed. All forms of mercury are toxic at varying degrees, but the health effects depend on the form of mercury, whether it is elemental, inorganic, or organic, and the type of exposure, whether it is acute, meaning a short duration exposure, usually at high concentration, or chronic, meaning long duration of exposure. The health effects also depend on the route of exposure, whether the mercury is inhaled, ingested, or absorbed through the skin, and the dose or the amount of mercury exposed through food or water. For example, let's discuss acute health effects of elemental and inorganic mercury. If a person is acutely exposed to high levels of elemental mercury, then it can affect the central nervous system, causing tremors, slowed nerve functions, and memory loss. If a person is acutely exposed to high levels of mercury through inhalation, then it can result in kidney failure, chest pains, shortness of breath, and pulmonary function impairment. Acute exposure to inorganic mercury by ingestion may result in nausea, vomiting, and severe abdominal pain. So, now let's see the chronic effects of mercury. The main historical event of chronic organic mercury poisoning happened in 1956 at Minamata Bay, Japan. Methyl mercury poisoning occurred in humans who ingested fish and shellfish contaminated by methyl mercury, which was discharged in water from a chemical plant in Japan. People suffered from the loss of peripheral vision, prickling sensation in the hands, feet, and around the mouth, lack of coordination movements, impairment of speech, hearing, and walking. A total of 2,265 people were officially recognized as having Minamata disease, out of whom 1,784 died. Chronic health effects of inorganic mercury poisoning are called acrodynia or pink disease, which is characterized by profuse sweating, erythematous rash of the palms and soles, desquamating and painful sensitivity to touch, fatigue, and irritability. And recently, a panel study indicates that blood mercury causes decline in the liver function by increasing the levels of liver enzymes. Attention pregnant ladies. If a pregnant woman is exposed to methyl mercury, then both the mother and fetus will get affected by methyl mercury poisoning, as methyl mercury can pass through the placenta and reach the child inside the womb. The child later may suffer from impaired cognitive thinking, which implies poor performance on the test of mental function, poor memory, and inattentiveness. 74% of the research studies confirms that mercury causes autism in children. If you want to know whether you have been exposed, I would suggest you to go for the physician office to have a lab test. If you have been exposed to mercury for more than a year, then the mercury levels will be checked in your hair and toenail, whereas acute exposure can be detected through blood and urine analysis. Very rarely, cerebrospinal fluid and breast milk will be sampled for mercury level. As we all know, prevention is better than cure. The federal government is acting to reduce and prevent the exposure of mercury by applying laws which say that commercial fish cannot be sold to the public if they have methyl mercury levels above an action level of 1 parts per million. And EPA currently recommends that the level of inorganic mercury in rivers, lakes, and streams be no more than 144 parts mercury per trillion parts of water to protect human health, which in turn reduces the pumping of mercury into the water by industries. Similarly, drinking water should not contain more than 2 parts per million of inorganic mercury. Hmm. What do you think we can do from our side? From our side, we have to handle and safely dispose of any spilled mercury from broken instruments, rather spreading it, and avoid fishes that contain high mercury content. Educate children not to play with materials containing mercury and avoid using mercury containing products, rather use rechargeable batteries, electronic thermometers and barometers. And insist your dentist not to use amalgam for your filling. Rather go for safer alternatives like composites. If we do so, we can bring down the manufacture of products that use mercury and eventually reduce the mercury into the environment. I would like to conclude by saying keep up with the technology that does not use mercury and keep mercury out of your lives and environment. Thanks for listening to me. Let me know if you have any questions. I will be available here for another 1 hour, or you can reach me at the phone number or email ID available on the pamphlet. Thank you.